the world is moving faster. Technology is moving faster. We can see it all around us. So that system cannot be resolved from the system.
In times of great change, the beginner's mind has the advantage. If you're just starting out with investing, or you've been doing it for a while, it doesn't matter. You're going to be better off by listening to this podcast, and especially today's episode. I like to cover the basics and some of the more macro concepts also, because we all have blind spots and we can all do better. Some investors, when starting out though, get stuck on perfecting the art of personal finance. That's where they start, that's where they finish, which is a shame because it's about so much more than just budgeting, the old personal finance thing, and investing is about so much more than just personal finance. Some get stuck though on just one or two of the tools or strategies with investing. Shares, property, index funds. It's not about the tools though. It's about what you're trying to build. Some get stuck in their own worlds though, forgetting that the real reason why they've had success or failure is often part of a much bigger puzzle they do well to understand more of. So today, we're going to explore a very important idea, how naturally occurring deflation can make us wealthy in the truest sense. Inflation, for background, is when your dollars or when your currency become less valuable over time. And deflation, therefore, is the opposite. It's when our currency becomes more valuable over time. Currently, we're in a period of inflation that's virtually impossible to ignore, and it's shining a light on a question I think we need to become more bold in asking. Why does the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, just like all the other central banks in the world, have a mandate to keep inflation between 2 to 3%? Why are we told, and more importantly, why do we believe that over time we need more of our currency to buy the same stuff that we need in life? I'd encourage you to dig deep around the possible answers for this, because we're experiencing interest rates not seen for almost a decade to combat inflation, which was created by our central bank in the first place. First, with inflation, the cost of everything appears to get more expensive. Then we get higher interest rates as well, which cripples those trying to claw their way into asset ownership. Unelected central banks have authority to reduce inflation through higher interest rates. Most of us understand this. That's what's going on right now. But it goes both ways. They also have the authority to create inflation too. Now, this might seem basic, but this is quite significant. This means they will engage in activities actively and purposefully to debase our own currency, to oversee the creation of new currency within the banking system so there's more money chasing a finite supply of property, investments, goods, and services. All in the name of financial stability, they've created a society where those who hold assets catch tailwinds and the headwinds fall to those who still believe studying hard and getting a good job is all they need to do. Now, if that doesn't offend you, then you really need to read the book written by today's guest, Jeff Booth, The Price of Tomorrow, Why Deflation is the Key to an Abundant Future. Jeff Booth is an incredibly amazing forward thinker, a provocateur, a tech thought leader, and a revolutionary author who's fearlessly attempting to shift the collective perspective and shake the foundations of understanding around our economy and society. I'm incredibly fortunate to have this conversation with him. Inflation is theft, pure and simple, and to suggest otherwise is to be aligned with the team responsible for much of the world's inequality. Jeff believes a deflationary future powered by unstoppable technological advances will create a new type of abundance. We'll learn about his views on inflation's link to climate change, the concept of housing costs under a Bitcoin system, and what a deflationary environment means for AI-induced job losses. I trust you'll enjoy this conversation as much as I did, and if so, I'd really appreciate a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to this show on. Let's begin.
You're listening into the Everyday Investor Podcast. Passive investing, property investment, managed funds, and crypto. If you're an everyday person wanting to build new wealth for the new world that you're heading into, then this podcast is for you. I'm Darcy Ungaro, your host. I'm a qualified financial advisor, but I'm still learning how to invest better and teach others how to do the same. I talk with guests and cover a range of topics designed to get you to think for yourself here. But please keep in mind, this can't be considered financial advice. Be sure to do your own research here and seek qualified advice of your own before making investment decisions. If you want more information, check out the show notes in your podcast player and make sure that you've subscribed to YouTube also. Then follow The Everyday Investor on all social media channels. The NZ Everyday Investor podcast receives support from the following partners: Easy Crypto, the safe and easy way to buy and sell crypto in New Zealand; Gorilla Technology, increasing business success through innovative and strategic IT solutions; Ungaro & Co. Financial advice for everyday people building everyday wealth. Hope you enjoy the show. Let's get started. Jeff Booth, how are you?
Really good. Nice to be here, Darcy.
Fantastic. Now, I've read your book twice now, and I'm probably going to hit it again one more time when I'm on a plane trip shortly. But when you were writing this book, obviously you were watching things unfold for a period of time before you decided to write this book, and you could have easily just done nothing except sit on the sidelines. So firstly, before we get into what the book's about and unpack that a little bit, why did you write this book?
Probably two reasons. Primary reason was I had kids and I worried about the world in which they would grow up in. Secondary reason, I was just getting frustrated with talking about the same thing over and over again and people missing what I was talking about. And I'm talking to policymakers, I kind of was on the inside of the tech revolution, from Google, all of the big tech companies, and building my company at the time. So many friends within there that I thought were policymakers on the other side of that equation that I thought were totally, completely missing what was actually happening. So partially frustration and mostly I worried about the world in which my kids would grow up in.
Yeah. Okay. And I know that you mentioned this in the book several times around mindset, that often people hear what they want to hear and it's filtered through their own experiences, and people don't often hear you for what you're really saying. And that's probably what you're alluding to there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So what is this book about? The Price of Tomorrow, why deflation is the key to an abundant future. At a high level, what is this book about?
It should be pretty simple to see that we have technology moving exponentially that should be creating deflation. That when I say should be, I mean the natural market is deflationary. It should be obvious that productivity gains should flow to society in the form of lower prices. And so what entrepreneurs do is they find parts of a market that are inefficient and they use technology or something to be able to make that more efficient and bring more value. What we do when they do that is use the thing they use because they've created because it gives us more value. And that process over and over again, especially as it speeds up, should be bringing prices and us to be able to get more for less every single year while prices decline and we work less to be able to get more. It's the process of a free market. In fact, that process that I'm talking about is the sum of human history that kind of we live on top of, and now it's moving exponentially. And so we're at a point in the feedback loops where machine to machine intelligence and artificial intelligence is moving exponentially, and that's going to merge with machines that are going to do the work, not just the digital work better than us, but our physical work better than us, and it's going to automate that process too and remove a bunch of labor as it does. Now that labor being removed isn't necessarily a bad thing if prices fell so that we could live our lives without having to have high cost jobs, having to make more money to be able to pay back, to have it need a job. But our existing financial system was wired exactly the opposite way. It has $400 trillion of debt now. When I wrote the book, it had $250 trillion of debt. But it has 400, and remember, that's only 4 years ago. And it speaks to what I was worried about and what is coming true. That $400 trillion of debt, as with the 250 before it, was already insolvent. It is insolvent today. And the only way to pretend it's solvent is to manipulate money to be able to create inflation, to be able to pay back the debt in cheaper dollars tomorrow. And so why you have all policymakers saying we're going to get more jobs, we're going to make more jobs and make prices rise as a result, is what we're trying to do is not let that debt collapse. Because if you let deflation take hold from the existing system, the real cost of the debt explodes. And I'll give you an example why. Where is the money for taxes or to be able to pay back the debt? From your calculator app on your phone, right? Or from the photos you use today. And you used to take photos, you used to take a limited amount of photos, and there were a lot of businesses in that supply chain that made money on the photos. And now those photos are free. And so or the calculator app is free. So there's less and less as technology does the job better. There's less and less to tax or to create to be able to pay back that insolvent debt. And if so, the debt just explodes right away. And because it's all built on essentially a house of quicksand, allowing that credit market to collapse creates counterparty risk. One bank, then another bank, then multiple banks, then supply chains on top of that, and the entire global economy rests on effectively that $400 trillion of debt being solvent.
Right. So if I was just, and I've heard you talk about the calculator app, and I was going to mention that. So thanks for bringing that up, because I remember when I was doing my finance degree, I had to buy, I think it was an HP2B calculator, and it was like $250 or something like that.
We must be the same age.
Yeah,
I remember. Yeah.
And like you say, it's free. So what you're basically saying is that the underlying value that we used to rely on, that the new debt was created around, that value pretty much falls to zero as what the marginal cost of production falls to zero as things become cheaper and cheaper. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So in economics, the prices fall to the marginal cost of production. The marginal cost of production of a line of code is zero. And so why you see a lot of technology going to zero is because the marginal cost of production of that line of code becomes zero over time. And so what you could do to try to stop that is you could regulate an industry. What you could do to try to stop that in certain within your borders is protect an industry. But always over a longer time period, that regulated or protected industry is still at competition against the world. And the world still competes. And then those regulated or protected industries become uncompetitive. They become uncompetitive from the world competing, and they fall away. So again, there is nothing that can stop the prices falling to the marginal cost of production over a long period of time. And so what you see today is governments trying to stop that by manipulating money, which pushes up prices of other things. And then houses become a store of value against the manipulated money, because inflation is wage deflation. It's exactly the same concept. So if you're saving your money in savings or your wages, they're being eroded at the value of that manipulation. So you see society going harder and harder and harder, and then asking for things like UBI. And why are they asking for UBI? Because they can't pay for the prices that have already been manipulated higher, and they're so scared of what happens when I lose my job. And so they make the thing that's actually creating their pain stronger by doing so. And what you will get into, you haven't seen it yet, but you will for sure get into, you're going to have a whole bunch of ludicrous propositions that say, let's tax the robots. And what they're really saying is, let's slow down the rate of prices falling so that you have to work more and you're reliant on the state.
Right.
That's what they're saying by doing that, because what should happen in the free market, you shouldn't have to do that. What should happen is those prices should flow as that labor is removed, it should flow directly to you in the form of lower prices, so you don't need to work as hard. That's what technology is used for all over. And we're measuring that system by a system that's distorting all price signals.
Yeah.
And warping people's minds against that, to which they go to the system that's creating their pain and fight against each other and it disintegrates further and further. So the divide of society is actually a result of what we're talking about as well. That's why in the book I wrote a chapter about us versus them, and what would happen as this went further and further.
Is it kind of like all of so the benefits that deflation should bring should directly improve our lives? At the same time, though, the value of our money is constantly being eroded. So is it like the value that deflation is bringing or supposed to bring, is it like it's being stolen away from us at the same time?
So it's probably way worse than people actually realize. I'm just going to guess, because there's no way to measure a counterfactual, right? So you can measure things inside the system, but you can't measure what's outside the system. And every single price around the world, energy prices, food prices, they're all tied to the manipulation of money as well. So you're not just having technology in some things, and then some things are going up. You have technology in all things, and all things are being manipulated. If I was to estimate what the natural rate of deflation would be today, it would probably be 4 or 5% per year compounding. So that means every year, instead of prices going up by 8% a year, prices would come down by 5% a year. And so the rate of theft, what we're talking about, is actually closer to 13 or 15%. It's not from zero. And I know theft is a hard word, but that is what it is. Nobody votes for it. You don't have a vote in how much inflation is going to be created and how much money is going to be manipulated. You believe you have a free market vote that sits on top of that system, left or right, and no matter which party, they will do the exact same thing. They will just favor a different constituent when they do it. But it's a centralizing function. That centralizing function then requires to monitor and control you over time, because it's not based on the free market. And so government expands, and it expands to be able to, so if there's not enough jobs in the free market, the government and they can print as much money as they want, they keep on expanding at your cost. And then people race in and support that. It's the same thing you see in all these failed states or dictator states that we don't believe could come to our markets. And they are coming to our markets. They're already here.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess like when I'm talking to people, I'm helping them to form strategies on how to build wealth. And often one of the easiest things to do is just buy assets. And it's really that simple, because you buy assets, you buy a property, you are riding that wave. And I guess this is exactly what governments are doing, right? You borrow, you're kind of like shorting the dollar, and the value of that dollar effectively goes down over time relative to your assets. Eventually you sell the assets, repay the debt, and that's just one of the things that we've been doing for ages. But I guess in this new world tomorrow, would I be correct in assuming that at some stage that ends, or it can be kicked further down the road here?
So it can be kicked further down the road, because but you have to be really careful. The asset lives in the country that you're in. And whether it's a oil reserve asset, or if it's a house or an apartment building, it typically lives there. So if you're investing in that country and it lives, and the country has created a whole bunch of populist movement because most people can't pay for something, and then the assets are in a certain country, the rich get targeted by whatever government comes in, and they take back the assets and they reprice them or redistribute through taxes, and they tax those assets, and those assets can be moved. So that's where you get, in some countries, what you'd have is a nationalization of a sector, and all of the investors in that sector get wiped out. Then this has precedent in history. This has precedent in, like, if you say the Weimar Republic, who was targeted who had the assets. And they were scapegoated to be able to create a populist movement against those people. Why did many of the people stay? Because all their assets were inside that country. And it's important to know, Darcy, too, that from where we are, there is no solve from the system. There will be a whole bunch of belief that there's a new leader who can. There will be a whole bunch of belief in this, but mathematically, if you just think, $1 trillion of debt, if you paid it back at a dollar a second, it would take approximately 32,000 years to pay back. Yet there's $400 trillion of debt. It breaks your brain on how insolvent the debt is. $1 a second, 32,000 years. And that gets harder if you allow deflation to happen. But the world is moving faster. Technology is moving faster. We can see it all around us. So that system cannot be resolved from the system, no matter what anybody tells you, no matter what. There is no resolve from the system. Why I've been eerily accurate in my predictions is because when you're making predictions based on a first principle that something is changed and you know what has to come. Remember in the book I talked about if that exponential debt is rising, the time I wrote my book, there was 185 trillion of debt within the preceding 20 years to produce $46 trillion of economic growth. So 4-to-1 debt for almost 4-to-1 debt for every dollar of growth. And I said, I wasn't as much worried about that. That's already behind us. I was worried about going forward at the exponential trend of what should be happening. That means the debt has to come exponentially, or the manipulation of money has to come exponentially to be able to counter that. And that's what I was worried about. And that's what we see as we look. And then if you carry that forward, then you worry about the exponential division of people and control to be able to pretend that's solvent. So that's exactly what we see all over the world. And that's why Bitcoin, even in the book, I only wrote a paragraph on it. And I thought, okay, it's a plausible solution, but maybe there's other solutions. But as I as I went deeper and deeper and deeper, I found it the only solution to be able to allow us to both transition. So it's a transition mechanism to this new world. And in fact, if you simplify everything and just say, it's following that economic law that I told you about, prices falling to the marginal cost of production. What's happening is in Bitcoin terms, if you're measuring in Bitcoin, and I'll caveat this, as long as it stays decentralized and secure, which I'm pretty confident it will. And when I say pretty confident, I'm very, very confident it will. But as long as it stays decentralized and secure, then that means all prices forever will fall against Bitcoin. Okay. People only think it's going up because it's 21 million cap. People only think it's going up because the denominator changing in the existing paradigm that they're measuring it from. Again, what it shows you is a belief system, and they're measuring in US dollars, or they're measuring in Turkish lira, or they're measuring in Lebanese currency, instead of measuring from the system without manipulation.
Right. And that's a really tough concept to get. Like if you're going away overseas and you're bringing some of your money, quite often the first part of the trip is converting everything back to your local home currency, and it messes with your mind, and it ends up potentially ruining your holiday until you finally just let go and realize, right, everything is denominated in a different currency. So that's kind of, I guess you could push that out to describe what you're talking about here with Bitcoin, right? Like when you start to measure everything through Bitcoin and you look at the value of your home, the value of goods and services, everything, then it's deflationary. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. 5 years ago, it would have cost me over 100 Bitcoin to buy a house. Today, it costs me 10.
Right.
In a couple of years, it'll cost me 5 or 1. And that'll keep happening because most of the housing value, when people think about a house, it has changed from being a utility to being a store of value. So it's trying to store the wealth because paper money or digital isn't storing that wealth very well. So people are putting it somewhere else that they think it'll store it better. Yeah. But that store of value that they're choosing because there wasn't Bitcoin before is inferior to Bitcoin because it relies on, as you continue to do this, as governments manipulate money, that housing will be taken back from you through taxes or through force, and so depending which country you're in, and it's left stuck to the jurisdiction. You can't move it. Whereas Bitcoin, you can move anywhere. And so what that'll do is over time, prices will fall to the marginal cost of production. P.S. There's also been technology in housing and all the products that are in housing, they're in labor and machines that build housing. So you ask yourself, why is housing up so much? And again, you come back to the same thing. It's only up so much because the dollars are down so much. If you're a renter in that house, and why I say inflation is wage deflation, then their wages are going down in real time to be able to pay for somebody else's rent seeking. And it will not last. It just mathematically, it will not last. And in Bitcoin, what's happening is it's repricing the entire system, and that monetary premium in time is going to be gone. And in time, houses will also fall to the marginal cost of production in Bitcoin terms.
It's such a mental leap to get there. You're already there, but I think for potentially a lot of people watching or listening, it might be hard because they're still looking at, say, Bitcoin as something that is denominated in US dollars, and they're looking at Bitcoin as a very volatile and therefore untrustworthy asset. Whereas what you're saying is it's actually inverted.
It's the safest asset on the planet today. And I've done a lot of work on this, and I understand people's reservation if they're coming at it through the mainstream narrative, and they haven't done the work to understand what that looks like. And I completely understand, because I was once there too. And there's a lot of times people kind of find what I'm talking about or find what other people understand in Bitcoin, and they've moved over in it. But what I would say is most of those people that have done this have spent thousands of hours essentially trying to disprove a hypothesis. You know from my book, and you know from the things I've said, if you go back to all of the podcasts that I've done before, they keep on predicting, the predictions are right. Over and over and over, the predictions are right. In other words, my measurement is right of the greater economy. My measurement is being validated. If your predictions are wrong over and over and things are surprising you, and oh my God, this happened. Oh my God, this happened. If it feels like that, you're probably measuring from the wrong system. You're probably reinforcing the system that is being manipulated. If it feels like you're surprised at events that are unfolding around the world today, then you're probably in the wrong system.
Wow. Slightly controversial war. When you think about just how currency needs to be created potentially at an exponential rate just to keep this whole thing going, am I correct in assuming that war could play an integral role in justifying the creation of new currency units like this?
Absolutely. But if you just think about the current, so the world needs a neutral reserve currency, or not a neutral currency that can't be manipulated by one country. And there's kind of pros and cons if you have the world reserve currency that is under manipulation. The pro is everybody has to deal in your currency, the US dollar. And so what that means is if Russia wants to sell their oil, and you change your currency units by 8.5% per year, which is the average over the last 100 years by the US, the average over the last 100 years, 8.5% per year. That means that Russia is selling their oil, their hard assets, in something that's being devalued 8.5% per year. And then if you're using that value to create a military industrial complex to police the world, then that's not really a free market. Two things could be true at the same time. Putin could be a terrible dictator, and wouldn't want that to evolve around the world, and he could be right on this. It's just the way that the world works today. And what that means is there's a whole bunch of dystopia, there's a whole bunch of countries that are living under dictatorships, that the currency that New Zealand, Canada, US, our benefit is from stealing their labor. Cobalt wouldn't work unless we paid people in Africa $2 a day to mine it. And so if we had to pay the actual price of a neutral reserve currency where they could get rich as well, our economies might not look like they do. So again, that whole system is based on theft. Some people win and some people lose based on somebody gets to control the monetary system. And Bitcoin changes that paradigm completely by making everyone equal in it. It's just if you ask this, maybe for people that don't know Bitcoin as well, is why in the world would there be so much consternation about an honest open ledger? Because that's all it is. It's just an honest ledger. It's something where nobody controls it. Everyone benefits from it, and you can't change the ledger. It's just an honest ledger. Whereas we live in something that has theft in the ledger.
Yeah.
So if you lived in something that has a dishonest ledger or theft, and where some people can control it to the exclusion of some people, who would win? Who would lose? What would the world look like? And then what would they have you believe to keep control of the dishonest ledger? So when you see kind of the exploits and the chaos happening in the world, it's really clear why. It would just be a mere reflection of that dishonest ledger having to expand at an ever increasing rate to stop the technology abundance from flowing to us.
Yes.
And so Bitcoin changes that, and it changes it over time. And in every single person's view in the world, because it's open, has a choice. Every day they could either learn what I'm saying, and the minute they start pricing Bitcoin or start saving in Bitcoin, effectively what they're saying is, I'm not going to pay for $400 trillion of insolvent debt anymore. I'm not going to play the game that's creating the chaos anymore. I'm going to put my savings into something that feeds productivity and honest ledger and all of the benefits to humanity, something that brings truth, hope, and abundance to humanity.
Yeah. I see what you mean, though. Like, it does, because I've been, I guess, orange pilled for a few years now. So for me, it feels quite natural, but I can see how it can sound a little bit like a cult from the outside, perhaps looking in. But the good news is that it's not too late. Like you say in your book, that in times of great change, the beginner's mind has the advantage. So in this current climate, I guess, if you're a beginner in understanding Bitcoin, even right now, it actually, based on what you've just said, it means absolutely nothing. The fact that the price is what it is, and it used to be a lot cheaper, that doesn't matter, right?
So it's so really important how early we are. If the world's wealth today is 900 trillion, that means no matter what you denominate the denominator in, if you keep changing that, right, and the wealth goes bigger, but it's fake wealth, it's paper wealth.
That's right.
Right. Then your ability to live in that system is based on this denominator changing. But if you just took today and said, today it's about 900 trillion, of which 400 trillion is insolvent debt, that entire system, I believe, is going to be repriced into Bitcoin in time, as long as Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure. And you could do the work that I have to be able to essentially assign probabilities to that staying true. And my probabilities, I used to have kind of a 5% probability that something could break it. Now my probability is probably under 0.1%. Something could break it. So if that stays true, and it's going to reprice everything. And probably a simple thing, I just did this on Peter McCormack's show, and some people, it helped them understand what was happening. If you had 8 billion monetary units in the world and 8 billion people in the world, and Darcy, you had 2 monetary units and I had 1 monetary unit and somebody else had 0.5 monetary units. If all of a sudden there was this magic person who could, now there's 16 billion monetary units, and if you didn't have 4 and I didn't have 2, our pockets were picked, but you could have 3 and you would think you were doing well.
I see.
Right. And because you can't measure how fast the monetary units are expanding, and it's in the trillions, and our brains just break. Actually, I'd have people after this podcast just go and look on Google and say a visual representation of a million versus a billion versus a trillion. Just type that in, and your brain will break what $1 trillion it actually is, and then realize the monetary system is being manipulated at such a staggering rate that we can't comprehend what it does to us.
Because we're too inside of it,
We're
right?
too inside it. We're measuring it from that same system that's doing the manipulation.
Yes.
And all money is information.
Yeah.
You actually don't want more money. You want more of what you believe money will buy you.
Yeah.
So it's just a ledger explaining what you have versus and what you think you need to produce what you want. And so some people, their view of, I need X amount of money because then I can retire safely. I need X amount of money because then I can leave my kids something. I need X so I can do a travel every year. It's always describing the thing you want. It's not the money. If it was the money, then an Argentine bolivar would be equal to US dollar. It's just a piece of paper with faces and numbers on it. So it's just information describing what you really want. Meaning, if you manipulate that information at an ungodly rate that human beings can't even understand how much manipulation is in the information, and it's tying everything else, then that must mean we are looking through that misinformation. Everybody is. It's just magnifying that misinformation. But inside that system, everybody would think they have better information than someone else. And it would all be subject to misinformation. In fact, what we're talking about right now, you'd have to, by virtue of what I just said, you would have to argue that, is Jeff looking through misinformation? Right?
Yeah.
And I'd have to say, there is a high probability that I would be because of what I'm talking about, and I'm aware of it. So that's why I spend a lot of time kind of being a counterfactual, trying to disprove my hypothesis. And so far, I have not been able to disprove it.
Right. And does that kind of explain why in your book there is really only a very small section devoted to Bitcoin? Because the more you thought about this after writing the book, the more you became further convinced through that process that you just described that this probably is the way to transition to the new world.
Exactly. So what I thought is, there is not a politician on the planet who could get elected and say this. Like I said in the book, prices fall to the marginal cost of production. That means you should be getting more each year. And that means we're going to let the existing system default. And that means each year you're going to make less, but you're going to get more. Who on this planet, as a populace in voting, would ever believe that, versus another politician saying, "Don't worry, I'm going to solve it, and you're going to get paid more, and we're going to charge those people, those rich people, we're going to make them pay their fair share." Who would win that election? And so what you realize is it's not just them, it's us too, and we're empowering that. And it needed a system outside our self-interest, Bitcoin, that it was imposed on us through a consensus mechanism that everybody had control of, that nobody could change. It needed something so powerful that it could resist a system that is 10,000 times bigger than Bitcoin today, that keeps on making power at the top.
Yeah.
And in every major corporation, in every major, the higher you are in that system, the better you do from that system based on manipulation at everybody else's expense. So it would be really hard if you're controlling the news media, if you're one of the top money people in the existing system, it would be really hard to advocate for something that changes those rules.
Well, you're dangerous to the system, aren't you?
You're dangerous to the system. But that's why. So when you realize how much power would be against Bitcoin through narratives that you're probably looking through, that your audience is probably looking through, climate change narratives and all these, they're completely opposite to what's actually happening in Bitcoin. That Bitcoin is the only thing actually that could solve this paradox in climate. So when you realize that, you start to say, that's what it probably would look like from a system that was 10,000 times bigger than Bitcoin, trying to stop Bitcoin from having success and redistributing that value to all of us through prices falling.
Yeah. Okay. I want to go back to just economic paradigms, because for Regarding the price of tomorrow, we're assuming there is a tomorrow, but we're also assuming that if this tomorrow where deflation is creating abundance and making all of our lives better, we have to assume that the economic paradigms that we've run with for about 150 years, they need to expire because they're all tied up with labor and capital.
Yeah.
And in the new world where it's AI merging with machines and falling marginal cost of productions, surely there's a different economic paradigm. Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
That is what we're talking about here. And one system is measuring that paradigm in reality. In fact, that system that I'm living in, right, or mostly in, I've just transferred my brain to it. I measure in Bitcoin rather than than fiat.
Right. Okay.
It's just showing me economic truth.
Right.
It's showing me this happening. It's going to be clunky on the way through. But that volatility is going to. But if you kind of measure over a longer time horizon, that's what it's showing you, and prices will continue to fall forever. Right. That means that certain people and again, when you say cult or when people talk about Bitcoin in this, my simple answer is this: if my cult is just based on honesty and first principles and integrity, I'm happy to be in that cult. If somebody wants to call me say I'm in that cult, so that's my ad hoc answer to that. But what you see in this ecosystem is you see a whole bunch of people that understand what I'm talking about, that are literally living in kind of truth, hope, and abundance, and that's expanding. And when you meet people that really understand this, and I'm not saying that because all people eventually will, but when you meet people that really understand this, you start with a level of trust at a way deeper level, because those people have already done the work and they understand what this means. In the existing system, which is based on theft and mistrust and everything else, there's a tax on our time, because you can't trust people because the underlying ledger is bad. So and in this system that people have actually done the work on this in a way higher probability, for me, I just meet people in this that have already done this work, and they're kind of right here, right? You can start talking about the real things that matter rather than the nonsense.
I hear you. Yeah, and it's you're in Canada,
yeah.
French, English. I don't know how good your French is, but after a while, I suppose if you were learning French, you would learn to dream in French, and everything you think is in French, and so you're actually fully in. You're pricing everything in Bitcoin. You've fully immersed yourself into this world, and in that world, because effectively your wealth is appreciating in this world, because deflation does that. You don't feel, when you meet another person, you wouldn't feel envious. You wouldn't have your own ambition trying to come up and get the better of you all the time, because there's no insecurity there, right? Because your wealth is already there.
I never did, and I never did, and maybe that may be a little bit different in that I never looked up to money. I never looked down to money. I never looked to. I truly always thought that I can learn something from anybody, up, right, down, below, but I do understand when you say kind of there's expert bias, or there's when somebody is wealthy, people think they're smarter, or when there's and so I know the biases that kind of program in humans, and I know they must exist in me too, and I've always tried to make those biases less important in my life. I would say that would I always saw all people as equal.
So going back to the price of tomorrow, what does that mean? So the price of tomorrow, are you referring to, just in that title, are you referring to the transition to this new place?
I'm talking about everything. Like this rabbit hole is so deep, because when first people will start investing in Bitcoin, most people go in, I'm going to make a bunch of money on it.
That's right.
And then sometimes it's volatile, it goes down, and they sell it, or then they'll go in from there and they'll go, a whole bunch of altcoins are blockchain, and a whole bunch of nonsense, a whole bunch of fraud that's in kind of this overall ecosystem that's not Bitcoin, that they fall into because they're trying to make more money.
Yeah.
For the ones that keep going and understand Bitcoin, they realize that if you had an honest ledger in the world and prices continue to fall forever, and the output of that economic activity, where somebody, a productive member of society, creates something of more value that you use, and then other people see that and they say, and they attack that margin and they make it cheaper and cheaper until it goes to free, then the output of this world on our time, it expands our time in such a way that we don't actually have a word for what this looks like. We don't have so when people talk about democracy or capitalism or free market or libertarian Marxism or all of these structures, they're talking about structures to try to gain control of a population to make it run. Right? That's actually what they're trying in better ways. If you even if you looked at say what we used to, what still most people believe, we need an institution to protect us, and that institution. So let's say the Magna Carta or the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. Effectively, what those were enshrining laws or individual rights in people. And what that showed is when you did that, the free market was way better at creating value than a centralized market.
Right.
And those areas that actually allowed human freedoms and individual rights, freedoms. It wasn't every idea was good. It was just the cumulative, all ideas were better than one idea. And the free market exposed those ideas, and they gave us the ability to see more and get more. And as a result of essentially enshrining rights in populations against a centralized control structure. Now, but what ends up happening under manipulated money is the institution itself becomes corrupt. And the institution, it's because laws are subservient to money. And because as people control so much money, what they do is they either put in their elected board or their lawmakers or their or able to lobby against all of the people with no money, so no rights, and laws change over time. It's why money is superordinate to laws, and you can see this. If this wasn't true, then all nations kind of with dictators and would have the best laws, right? And it looks exactly the opposite around the world. So if that's true, and you can see it, and if you zoom out and you can see this everywhere, then it should be obvious that the institution and the Constitution would be a good example of this. Something enshrining this worked extraordinarily well, but we never had something that could be decentralized and secure at the same time. So we had to have an institution, which was then eventually corrupted from money, always. And now Bitcoin being decentralized and secure, you have this, all of us, and the security that no one person or no small group of people can control it. And that rewrites the paradigm of all rules going forward. Because the humans have never seen something that could be decentralized and secure together. So we had to put the institutions with checks and balances to protect us. But those checks and balances over time, because money was always outside of that, would always get eroded over time and corrupt the institutions. And that's where we find ourselves right now. So we have regulation to protect us from losing our money from a system designed to steal our money.
Yeah.
It's kind of an oxymoron.
Makes sense. And when we want help, we go to that same institution to say, hey, we need more help, right?
Yeah, we need more help.
Yeah, because you're doing such a good job of it already. So creative destruction, Joseph Schumpeter, you mentioned you spent a bit of time talking about the process of that, and I'm intrigued by what a new world looks like where you have, I don't know, maybe a new form of entrepreneurial agent, maybe it's AI, that is creating this creative destruction process and making our lives better. Is that kind of like a picture of how new innovation can start to happen? Is that we become the beneficiaries of new technological advances, but the development starts to become autonomous?
Yes, eventually. probably AI actually moves there. But if it moved there, then literally all prices would be free at that point. But over time, that's exactly what happens. The output of this work makes, even if you hated Bitcoin, even if you weren't, the output of this work allows prices to fall for you.
Yeah.
And so you're going to use it anyways. It's just Bitcoin is that system that is actually measuring that. And you could today, people could essentially own a piece of that system.
Yeah.
And so all of economic value on top of that's ever created on top of this new emerging peer-to-peer internet tied to energy,
Yeah.
it accrues to you over that time. And I would say if that, what I just said, if people don't kind of, if they're too far away and they don't, if what I said is true, or even a remote chance of being true, you probably owe it to yourself to look with an open and curious mind to see it, because it'll literally change your life, and it'll change the life of everyone around you that you help out to understand that too.
Yeah, that's so good. And that's probably a really good place to leave it. And because that's where new wealth is going to come from, probably, is an open mind. And it starts whenever you want it to start, right? So really appreciate your time, Jeff. If people want to follow some of your work, where's the best place that you can direct them to?
Probably my website, jeffbooth.ca, and make sure it's the .ca version. And if you're going to follow me on social media, make sure that the social media that you're following on is listed there. I'm spending more time on Nostr today and everything else. There's just so many scam accounts out there. And so I update everything to that website.
Excellent. It happened to me when I was following you on Twitter. I was immediately messaged by somebody who was definitely not you based on what they were saying. So yeah, it's really important. So jeffbooth.ca. Okay, awesome. And again, if anybody wants to check out this book, very much recommend it. I'll be hitting that for the third time shortly. The Price of Tomorrow: Why Deflation is the Key to an Abundant Future. Thank you very much. Very generous with your time, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Take care.
See ya.
Thanks for listening into the Everyday Investor Podcast. Like what you've heard, but you want more? Make sure that you've subscribed to our YouTube channel and subscribe to the Everyday Investor newsletter too. The links for everything are found in the show notes that you can access easily by swiping or tapping over the cover art in your podcast player. If you received value in some way, I'd love it if you could take the time to write a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Share it with a friend, or think of our show partners where appropriate. Easy Crypto, the safe and easy way to buy and sell crypto in New Zealand. Gorilla Technology, increasing business success through innovative and strategic IT solutions. And Garo & Co. Financial advice for everyday people building everyday wealth. Remember, some investments or strategies discussed on these episodes may result in financial loss. Be sure to do your own research and ideally seek qualified advice of your own before making investment decisions. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll catch you next time around.